You're listening to the Reinvest Podcast, where each Tuesday we show business owners and entrepreneurs how to diversify into real estate by equipping you with the tools and tactics to build generational wealth. Your hosts, Garrett Gatton and Seth Ciminillo. Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Reinvest Podcast, episode 115. We are at the end of 2024, and we're going to give you just a little bit of an attaboy right off the get-go. Seth and I both this last year have tried to make an intentional effort to read more books. It's been really good. We've gotten through a lot of them. Seth probably more than me, but we want to give you our top three from this last year. So Seth, I'm going to throw you the ball. What are your top three titles from this last year that you really liked? And give us like a nugget from each one of them.
Gosh. Okay, that's all of a sudden becomes a lot of information. Atomic Habits by unknown author. No, I'm just kidding. What is that guy's name?
Yeah.
I don't know. He's great, though. You should read it. No, Atomic Habits. That one's
James Clear. It's
James Clear. Yeah. That one has a lot of practical ways to form habits. So it kind of gives a lot of strategies, tips, data on how to form good habits, how to break bad habits, and kind of the whole idea of if you can improve 1% a day or improve something in your life every day consistently over the course of a year, over the course of months, over the course of decades, it compounds. So, great book. E-Myth for real estate agents. So that one's E-Myth. There's like a whole E-Myth series by Michael Gerber. Those books are great. I read E-Myth and E-Myth for real estate agents, but definitely recommend that. E-Myth stands for the entrepreneur myth. So it kind of talks about how to run your business like a business and not start a business because you're an entrepreneur, but you just get a job. So like, interesting book, has a lot of good principles in that. And then Sell or Be Sold by
Grant
Cardone. Yeah, that's the last one. Great book. It's not just for salespeople, not just for people in sales. It's for anybody, because anything you do, any job you're going to have in life, you will be selling something. So that's kind of the premise of the book, so I won't say any more about it, but that one's also a great book.
All right, my top three. So I really dove into the biography side of stuff this last year. One of my favorite biographies, and this is kind of my personal fascination with Theodore Roosevelt. There's like a 3-volume series. Each one is like 25 hours long. So just buckle down. I'm working through the second one. The first one, though, that I would recommend is The Rise of Theodore Roosevelt. Great book. If you like presidential history, American history, Theodore Roosevelt, leadership, it's a great book. Definitely would listen to that on Audible because it's more of a story format that you can digest easier, or at least I did. The second one is this is an Audible book, Never Finished. This is David Goggins Part 2. I just finished that on Audible. That was really good. I don't know. I just think the big one on that one is like we all kind of face those limiting beliefs and mindsets, and it's like his personal goal is just to
slap it out of you.
Yeah, just to break any kind of perceived limitation he has on his own life, and then challenge everybody else.
Just don't be weak.
Yeah, that's it. Just don't be weak. And but you know what? In this book, he was actually really a little more honest, not as like hardcore in the first one, but it's like wisdom had taught him some stuff. So anyway, like that one. And the third one, which we're actually going to talk about today, is The Road Less Stupid, which is the rich dad that Robert Kiyosaki talks about.
Yeah, if you've ever read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, the rich dad in that book is this guy. He wrote his own book, and it's
like 40 years
jam-packed of wisdom and knowledge.
It is, and he kind of coins this term called thinking time, and we're going to talk about that today in our episode. And really the premise of today, and it should be on a little bit on the shorter side, how to diagnose problems in your business, in your real estate investing portfolio. How do you know that you're actually getting to the root cause of what's going on? It's very easy to misdiagnose something, think the issue's over here when in reality it's something altogether. And
as a small company and as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, we're very reactionary. So you want to react and fix the problem. So and you want to spend as least amount of time on as possible, honestly. So, I mean, a lot of times we're reacting to the symptom and we're not actually finding what the real problem is that's causing, you know, all these symptoms in our business. And it causes us to waste a lot of energy, time, and money changing things or fixing things or addressing things that aren't getting to the root issue.
Well, I think that kind of frames why it's important today. And then the bigger that your portfolio gets, the bigger that your business becomes, the more complex those problems are because you're introducing more variables, right? People, employees, different channel partners, markets that you're investing in or that you're operating in. And so to develop this skill at an early point in your entrepreneurial career of how to set aside this time to think critically and know that you're going to get to the root of what these symptoms are is going to be crucial to your success, my success, Seth's success as well in business. So I don't know, can you kind of frame a little bit about like what's the premise of thinking time, and then we'll kind of get into applying that.
So in The Road Less Stupid, that is written by Keith Cunningham. If you read the book, don't get the audiobook. Get the physical book. The audiobook, it's just not a very good audiobook. You kind of want to see the questions that they pose in the book. Anyway, but throughout every chapter, he kind of ends the chapter with like, all right, we're going to do something called thinking time. And he explains it on the front end, but it's you getting alone and actually setting aside 45 minutes, an hour, or whatever that would be, and actually to start thinking through your problems. And so in the book, they prompt a lot of questions. And then they say, now you just sit there and get a notepad, get a piece of paper, get alone, and you just think uninterrupted for 45 minutes and just start working through those questions. And if you don't get through them all, that's fine. That's great. But usually it becomes a spider web of you start to tackle these problems, think through these questions. And what it's doing, it's teaching you how to get to the root issues or the root of the questions. And so you might start out surface level or, as you start in your thinking time, but very quickly it gets deeper and deeper as you really start to put some focused effort behind thinking through these problems. So it's all about being very intentional, getting rid of distractions, and then asking the right questions so you can get the right answers.
And I love it. He just kind of cuts through all the BS because he takes all these quips, these little phrases and these little things that you hear on social media or even just leadership. Leadership's always trying to condense down a principle in a simple format and throw it to you. And sometimes in the spirit of doing that, they generalize something and then you misapply that, right? And you're like, oh, I need to be a risk taker. And he's just like, all the most wealthy people in the world have actually figured out like how to preserve their money and not lose any money, right? And so he just talks through these principles that kind of push back on these generalizations you hear that you might be misapplying and are creating issues.
He's a really good section in there before we jump in. And this is relatable to real estate world, of passive income. He has like a really good section in the book on that. And he's just like, just think about it. Like there is no passive income. Get that out of your head. Like you're always going to be working. It's just how much can you leverage your time to make more money? And so it was kind of reframing the whole passive income thing. You see the clickbait of, real estate, create passive income, buy rentals. It's going to be passive. These renters are going to pay your mortgage. Who are the renters calling? So at some level, you're still responsible. Even if you have property management, at some level, you're still responsible and going to have to work. But it's how much can you leverage your time in order to still make money? And so that was good. I just really appreciated his perspective in that book and kind of made you think. Thinking time.
So we're going to take and identify 3 problems in real estate investing that you might find that are problems for you, things that you're struggling with, trying to get answers to. And then in the spirit of identifying a problem, we're going to go through some questions that are going to be good questions that you can sit down and spend some intentional thinking time on that will hopefully, again, lead you to what the root problem is of each of these problems. So problem number 1 is I can't find good deals. I think if I were to do a survey for anybody listening on this episode here, how many of you are looking to buy? Most of you would probably throw your hat in the ring and say, I'm an active buyer or I want to buy, I'm looking for a good deal.
I would buy if the right deal came along. Right. We've all heard that. We've all said that. Yeah. So I think everyone's looking for a good deal.
And we were in a market right now where, inventory is tight. We know all the reasons. We've talked about them on other podcasts, on this podcast, of why it's hard to find good deals. So what do you do with that? How do you diagnose like the root issues of what that is? And then more importantly, how to make adjustments in your business to alleviate that problem. So here's some questions. We're going to run through these, and then we're going to pick apart 2 of them to dive into a little deeper. Number 1, where are other investors finding their deals, right? So obviously other people are finding deals. Where are those places? Don't recreate the wheel. Someone else is finding success, go there. Are there key relationships that I need to revisit to source deals? Maybe you've put some feelers out there in the past, but you haven't followed up on those relationships. Have the metrics of what a good deal is changed? So we've been in a changing environment. How do we kind of change with what's happened economically? What consistent action am I taking to find deals? That's, again, a lot of asking the right questions is being honest with yourself. And then do you know what a good deal is? So let's pick apart these last 2. Seth, what consistent action am I taking to find deals?
Yeah, there's a lot of practical things. We're real estate agents, so I think we are on the front lines of a lot of investors, a lot of single-family investors even, that are like, I'm looking for a good deal. I'm looking for a flip opportunity. I'm looking for a rental, or I want my cash-on-cash return to be 15, 20%, or whatever it is. And you start to dig in, and it's like, well, how many, have you looked at any properties? And it's like, oh, I looked at one like a couple months ago. And it was like, okay, like you're doing something, but are you taking consistent action to actually achieve what you want? And so it kind of boils down to this of like taking responsibility for, you can't find good deals, not because of the market, not because your agent's not saying them to you, but are you actually taking responsibility and doing the things you can do consistently to find good deals? So just kind of a couple examples of what those are. You hear driving for dollars. So driving around, looking for vacant properties. Then once you find those vacant properties, you skip trace them. You go to the auditor's site, you get their information, you try to get a phone number, you put out some cold calls, and you do that consistently. I guarantee you're going to turn up some sort of seller somewhere, and you're going to buy a deal. Why? Because we have investors that do this all the time, and it works. So, but it's about doing it consistently and doing it enough volume to where you can actually find that good deal. A lot of times, though, we don't do that stuff, or you're not doing that thing because it's time consuming and it's hard. Well, there's no easy way to make money. There's just not. Yeah. There's no easy way to get real estate. And sure, if you take enough swings, you're going to hit a grand slam, and maybe you'll find a deal that parlays into like 3 other easy deals. But most of the time, it's just going to take a lot of consistent action. So, are you actively looking for good deals? Are you cold calling? Are you sending out letters? Are you driving for dollars? There's a lot of consistent actions that you can take. Just depending on what your strategy is.
It really does work. And, if you've been in a sales position before, it's a volume game. And so the wrong mindset is to, get all your resources together, find 20 properties that you think might be vacant, get the information for those people, reach out to the 20 and not get any success, and then walk away with the perception that doesn't work. We just didn't do it enough. And so it's a volume game. Anybody in sales who, especially working at a large company, they've got it really dialed in. Our salespeople need to make X number of phone calls to get this kind of conversion rate. And like, you have to put trust in that formula. But it really is that way. So ironically, maybe you're 60 calls shy of actually getting one deal to convert and you quit prematurely. So I like that consistency there. The second question that we referenced here for how I can't find good deals, what do I do? Do you know what a good deal is? I think ironically enough, again, we're trying to take everything out of these generalizations. Like, well, what are you looking for? I'm looking for a single family house with some equity. It's like, well, that's so generic that you might not even know when an opportunity in front of you would qualify for that. And so being really clear about what is a good deal and understanding those metrics. Part of knowing what a good deal is knowing what your strategy is. If somebody brings you a flip opportunity, but that's not your strategy, you'd be like, well, that's not a good deal.
It's not going to feel like a good deal, yeah.
So getting clarity on your strategy is huge. And then the second thing too is I think readjusting your perspective. I was trying to use private money to buy single family houses back in 2021, 2022, when interest rates were low. And that was a good strategy because you could get low debt on the other side of purchasing real estate, refinance and get most of your money back, and then have like great fixed rate debt or variable rate debt. And then interest rates started to increase, and it became a lot more difficult to utilize that strategy and get most of your money back on a BRRRR method. And so the economy is always changing, so you need to just adjust your expectations of what a good deal is. I don't know if you want to comment on anything with that, but
yeah, the last thing I'll say is, do you know what a good deal is? Do you know how to underwrite? Like, do you know how to properly underwrite a single family house or a duplex or a small multi or a mid-sized multi and actually be able to determine, oh, wow, you know what? After looking at the numbers, it is a good idea and it does meet my criteria, as far as a cash on cash return, if that's what you're looking for, whatever your criteria is. And the only way that you're going to get better at doing that and being able to do that faster is just getting the reps in. So learn how to underwrite deals. Just underwrite them. I would just underwrite them, even if you know you're probably not going to buy it. Start getting reps in, start underwriting deals, start underwriting single family houses. I mean, now, once you do it enough, you're at the point where you could look at a single family house, run the numbers in like a minute, and then you're like, oh, it's not going to work. But when you're just starting out, that seems like algebra. You're like, I don't even know how to do that, but it's all about getting in the reps. So to know what a good deal is, you got to get in the reps, whether that's a commercial property, running the numbers on that, or a single family house.
Problem number 2, I can't find enough capital. Money issue. Maybe you bought a deal and now you have to wait until you get more money to buy your next one, or you're trying to buy your first property, or you're trying to get into a larger scale of real estate that is a different price point altogether. At some point in your investment journey, money is going to be an issue. And so what happens when that's your problem? I can't find enough capital. So here's some thinking time questions. What are different types of real estate strategies and the capital that they require? So, flipping versus buying stabilized real estate that's going to be a 25% down payment on a commercial loan, they require different amounts of money. The price point that you're buying in is very different. Are you going to be an owner-occupant in a duplex or a triplex? That's going to require a different amount of money than, a different strategy. So I think the first one is what types of strategies are out there and which ones are more capital intensive. Second question, are there ways to access capital in the equity of my current real estate portfolio? We'll dive into that one here in a minute. What habits do I have personally to set aside disposable income? So, it's not just other people's money, but like the money that I'm bringing in through my effort in my W-2 or my job. How am I handling that money? What networks or online resources give access to real estate investors like me? Who are the types of people or institutions that loan money to real estate investors? So again, the whole idea of this is ask the right questions, get the right answers. And so it's crazy how that is the starting point to diagnosing a problem like I can't find enough money. So let's just highlight this one. Are there ways to access capital in the equity of my current real estate? So I'll say this, because this is more of a personal story for us, a partnership that I'm in. It takes usually about 2 or 3 years to really kind of get your feet underneath of you, stabilize a property, start getting some rental income in, maybe after bringing those rents up to market rate, and feel like you've recouped some of your capital expenditure. But once you hit that point, though, depending on how you bought the real estate, you're probably going to start to see some equity in the property or the properties. And I think a lot of the time we're looking at the money that we have set aside in a bank account or a private, loan that we have access to, and we overlook the equity that we have created and done the hard work to create in our portfolio. So after probably 3 or 4 years of taking outside capital and buying new deals into this partnership and working on those deals, we actually had a sizable amount of equity in our portfolio. Well, now that became an income or a capital opportunity for us to access. So we opened a line of credit, and now we have over $100,000 that we can pull from if the right deal came along. So that wasn't calling, my uncle who would give me a private loan. That wasn't me saving up $75,000 from my agent income. That was already in my property. So I think that there are ways to be able to access money from your real estate portfolio.
And then maybe there'd be times where you'd think about that and say, it would not be wise for me to leverage what I have already even further. Right. And then you would just, you think through and you find a different strategy. The other one that we wanted to touch on is, what habits do I have personally to set aside disposable income? So again, this is the problem. I cannot find enough capital. A lot of times in real estate, it's just like the thing to do is just be like, oh, you can get into real estate with no money. You can get into real estate with no money, no experience, and just, get private money, wholesale a deal, seller finance. And sure, you can do all those things, but I feel like a lot of times the first step should be like, okay, let's look at my own habits. Am I managing my own finances correctly? Am I living in a way that allows me to save money? Because at some point in your real estate journey, you're going to need capital. What happens when a roof goes, a water heater goes? Something's going to need repaired. And if you don't have adequate cash reserves, you're going to lose the property anyway, even if you got it with no money down. And so really kind of, what habits do I have personally to set aside disposable income? Look at your own personal finance habits. Are you saving money? Are you wise with your money? And if you can't manage your own money and your own finances, you're probably not going to be able to manage a property's finances correctly. So kind of just, it's looking back in yourself again, holding yourself accountable and being like, what are the things I can do to save up money? And maybe you can't save up the $25,000 for a down payment, but you could set aside 5 or 10, and then you go and find the other 5 or 10 with a private money loan or something. I
think this is, I have two kind of thoughts or quotes on this. One thing is, you don't rise to your goals, you fall to your standards.
Yeah.
And you get what you tolerate.
Wow.
And so,
are those both Tony Robinson?
I don't know. I lose track of who originally.
I feel like I was listening to him and he said both of those. He was lighting me up.
But it's very true. And you may have a bunch of real estate related goals, but really the ceiling that you're going to come up against are not your goals, they're your standards. And that's just a hard thing to look in the mirror back at yourself and say, what are the standards I have for myself? And that applies to your personal finances, right? So how much money am I setting aside? And oftentimes, if you're not measuring your personal finances, you're actually not doing as well as you think you are, because there's always those hidden things, those hidden habits, or the things that you minimize or overlook or justify that have a bigger impact on your finances than you think they do. And so the other thing is, how you do one thing is how you do anything. And that's a David Goggins one, which I think kind of comes from the military. They push that, which is really good again. And I was convicted of that. I was like, man, I need to double down on my personal finances, because that's only going to make me better at managing my portfolio or high level investments for other people. So I think that's a great one that's under people's nose that they don't see. All right, problem number 3. I'm not seeing the returns that I want in my investments. So you could verbalize this different ways. I'm not cash flowing as much as I want. My ROI is not where I want it to be. I'm not seeing the returns that I want. So that could be a lot of different things, but essentially you're not making enough money in real estate. That's the problem. So here's some questions. What are hidden and visible expenses? Because there's always hidden expenses. And so if you don't know what they are, then you don't know how they're negatively affecting your cash flow. How do my actual financials compare to my initial projections? That makes the assumption that you're tracking your current financials and going back and saying, okay, when I underwrote this, what were my initial projections and how did that stack up? That's how, like what Seth said, that's how you get better underwriting, is going back after buying a property and getting that feedback. Oh, I totally overlooked this aspect of my underwriting. Question number 3, how can I adjust the variables that control my cash flow? We'll dive into that one in a second. The last one is, what are the assets that are my top performers and my underperformers? So as you begin to acquire multiple properties in real estate, you're going to see that certain properties do better than other ones. And eventually, you're going to have some that are the underperformers that are going to drag on your portfolio. they're requiring or demanding kind of a disproportionate amount of resources and not giving you very much in terms of cash flow. So let's go into this. What are hidden and visible expenses? You had mentioned underwriting. Talk about some of that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of times when people are starting out, specifically for beginners, they're gonna underwrite as if they're gonna self-manage the property, and so you might underwrite and say, oh man, I have this super great return, 15%, but you don't have anything in your underwriting for management. You don't have anything in your underwriting for lease-up fees or an ongoing property management. But at a certain point in your business, you're probably going to want to hand that over. And then all of a sudden, that whole time, you just had a phantom property that had a phantom 15%, but it was actually an 8%. Half of that got just eaten up by property management fees. And 8% is still, but maybe you wouldn't have bought the property had you known that it was actually going to be an 8% return at some point. Because
it would have been on the bubble.
Because maybe it didn't meet your criteria anymore. So even if you're going to self-manage, you got to make sure you have your maintenance costs estimated. You got to make sure you have your CapEx cost estimated on the property. And capital expenditures are for like big things like roofs, furnace, water heaters. If you know of, furnace or a roof is going to have to be replaced within the first couple of years, like you need to be budgeting that stuff into your underwriting. So that way, if the capital that you're going to have invested into the deal will still meet your criteria from a return on capital perspective. And it's things like that just get overlooked a lot. Maintenance, a vacancy cost. Your property is going to be vacant. So like if you are underwriting a vacancy cost in your underwriting, you are not getting a clear picture of what your returns are going to be. Because at some point a tenant's going to leave and you're going to have to either, do a light rehab or a full rehab on that unit. And it's just going to take time to get a new tenant in there and lease it up. So that would be a hidden cost.
And I would say even clarifying too a little bit on like how certain expenses affect your income, right? So there's bottom line revenue and top line revenue. And vacancy is an expense, but it affects your top line revenue. Because for every time, every month or week that is vacant, that is no income coming in at all versus holding costs on a property, that cost, I'm going to set the thermostat to 60 and, we're going to still have an electric bill or a gas bill, but it's going to be a fraction of when someone else is in there. And so understanding what's going on, I've been hit with this. If you don't know how you're finding success in your business or in real estate, then you're not going to be able to replicate that. And it's only a matter of time before something happens. And so you really have to understand, how did I get here? Because there was a lot of people that thought they were really good investors in 2019 and in 2020. And all they did was they bought in an up market when money was cheap. And that's part of what The Road Less Stupid gets into. He talks about how he lost everything in the real estate crash in 1980. And part of that was they had this hubris or this pride of like, wow, we're so great. And they didn't realize that it was the tailwinds of the market that were really that were helping them more than what they thought. So, okay, how can I adjust the variables that control my cash flow? Again, this is understanding what are the levers that actually dictate my return in a real estate investment. So let's go over a couple of them. Obviously, number one is you have the top line side of this. That's your income. That's gross income, gross rent. What am I renting my properties for? Be it commercial, be it a residential apartment. What's the rent for that property? The second one would be debt service. So what's my debt for this property? That's a variable that's going to dictate money in your pocket versus money not in your pocket. I would say how your leases are written, like what's the obligation for who's paying utilities, who's got ongoing, maintenance costs like snow removal and lawn care. All of those are variables as well. So when you're sitting down saying, I'm not getting as much money as I want, look at those things, piece them apart, go to the debt service. Okay, could I get a better debt product on my property than what I have currently? Maybe you got this a couple years ago, you said it, you forget it, and you haven't messed with it because you've been focused elsewhere and it's in place. Well, maybe you could restructure something that would increase your cash flow. Are your rents where they need to be? When's the last time you did a rent increase to accommodate for just the natural inflation that we experience on an annual basis? If you're not, and I'm guilty of this, I'm not saying that I'm perfect in this, but if you haven't readjusted your rents every year, even in a nominal way by $15 to $20, then you're not keeping up with inflation. Are there improvements you can make to your property that, if you are on the hook for utilities, could reduce those expenses? A big, easy one, if you're not doing LED lighting, then you're just leaving money on the table, because there's some really low-cost ways to make your properties more energy efficient. So all of those things, again, we're just posing, sit down, ask the right question. How can I adjust the variables that control my cash flow? Spend critical time thinking about that. And if you have multiple properties and you find a solution for one of them, then the likelihood you're going to be able to apply that to other parts of your portfolio are pretty high. Any last comments on thinking time and just kind of this concept of setting aside this designated critical thinking opportunity?
No, I mean, it's a really simple principle. And even like if you guys are familiar with EOS or Traction, their whole thing to diagnose problems is called IDS. Identify, discuss, and solve. And it's really just the same thing. It's looking at the problem and taking times to identify, okay, what's the real issue? Identify it. What's the real issue? Discuss it. And then you come up with a solution. And it's really just being intentional. So often we're just on the go. We want things fast. We're moving so fast that we don't take time to stop and think through our problems. And it's just really powerful when you have focused effort. Your brain can really start to rev up and really start to solve that issue.
And on the whole consistent action, if you do this once or twice, then you will get the benefit of doing it once or twice versus making this a standard or a discipline in your business. So challenge you there. Guys, it is the end of 2024. We're excited for a new year.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas, and we'll see you next year.
As always, excited that you joined us for another episode of the Reinvest Podcast. If you want to learn how you can use your hard-earned capital to diversify into real estate, go to our website, reinvestcapital.us, and shoot us a message. Move farther, reach higher, and grow deeper.